Welcome to our special school committee meeting here at Dr. William Arnone. Today is Tuesday, March 26th. Call the meeting to order. Mr. Sullivan?
Yeah.
Mr. Gomes?
Here.
Ms. Oliver?
Here.
Mr. Sullivan?
Here.
Myself, Tony Rodriguez, as the vice chair here. The chairman, Mayor, is running a little bit behind. When he comes in, he'll take over this meeting, and Dr. Cobbs is in attendance. Hearing the visitors, we have two visitors. First, I would like to call Ms. Nora Acevedo, if you can step up to the podium.
Good evening, school committee members, Superintendent Cobbs, school and community members. I am Ms. Acevedo, ESL teacher at Brockton High. Educators came into the school year with a need for a cell phone policy and dress code policy, and absolutely nothing has changed in those areas. We need clear expectations and guidelines in place to make our schools safer. Here's a list of things that have not been addressed at the high school. Teachers still do not have keys to unlock their classrooms. You have a plan for next year, but we need the keys now. Please get them out of the closets and hand them to us so we can protect our classrooms from vandalism this year. Cell phone policy is not being enforced. Some parents even call their students during class time, further disrupting our lessons. I spend an incredible amount of time daily telling students to put away their cell phones and their hearing devices. This is taking away valuable learning time daily. Students are still wandering the hallways before school starts, during all periods and lunches. No one is watching the doors or hallways, and some students are letting outside individuals into a school. It is important that administrators listen to our suggestions and put our recommendations into practice immediately. We do not need more bi-monthly meetings to discuss issues that in the present do not address safety. We need to feel safe in our workplace. This is an emergency, and safety warrants these conversations. The fact that administrators undermine the safety concerns of staff and students is alarming and very detrimental to our mental health. We are never asked how we're feeling. We do not get information on colleagues hurt on the job. We are not informed on how students who have been hurt are doing. Our pleas for safety have been ignored the entire school year. I would ask this to administrators. Instead of walking by the crowds of students wandering the hallways and ignoring what you see, please address these students and bring them back to classrooms, or bring them to the office for consequences. I would also like to address what some administrators are saying that makes the situation worse for us educators and unsafe for all at the school. Instead of speaking to reporters about how safe you feel in our school and how you have never experienced violence at a school, ask yourself this question. How would staff being now on medical leave due to concussions received at the workplace feel about what you said about your remarks? Some have to retire early due to injuries received at the workplace. Some of you go on social media criticizing educators for speaking the truth. Some try to silence us, including some retired administrators. I'm urging you to enforce school rules before more students and staff are hurt. It is your responsibility to make our schools safe. Remember, nothing changes when nothing changes. Thank you.
Mr. John C. Williams, please.
Good evening. My name is John Charles Williams. I originally came to speak about the SOA funding and how I can't believe that we just had one talk about what SOA is, and you guys have a possible vote on it tonight when you guys made such a historical screw up with the first round. But there are other more pressing issues. I brought somebody to a meeting at the high school yesterday, and I sat in a parking lot for about an hour and a half, and I watched stream after stream of students walk out of the building, walk under the gym and hang out, walk across the field, walk right down and out the parking lot. I was on the phone with a friend, Odell Wilson, who's thinking about coming back to help. And As we're on the phone, I stopped the group and I said, hey, are you guys supposed to be leaving? They said, listen, we don't have any more classes. We just sign in the cafeteria and we leave because we can, basically. And then I saw one of my students, a student we had in the 6th grade. We had pumped this guy up and he was on top of his game. We had him meet the mayor in the summer of 2020 because we said, this kid has the charisma to be the next mayor. And I watched that young man walk out of high school at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So something must be done. In regards to the SOA funding, I won't go through everything that I was going to go through for the lack of time. But we have an opportunity to really help our kids again. We don't need buses. We don't need middle school sports. We need supports for our kids. Champion City has had its fill with Brockton Public Schools. I can consult and give you guys some answers on what y'all need to do to help, but working with you guys, it makes no sense. But I will address who you are looking to introduce to our schools. A sexual predator. So you better do your homework, because I sat in a meeting with community leaders, with a mother who explained how her son was violated by this man, and you all are looking to introduce him to our kids. So we better pay attention when we want to remove people and we want to remove what works. You better pay attention to what you're introducing to our children.
There are no additional signees for hearing of visitors. We will now go on to agenda number 5, which is discussion and potential vote, Student Opportunity Act, SOA 3-year district plan.
Superintendent Mulder. She's been doing the yeoman's work on this particular item, and Assistant Superintendent.
Good evening.
So we're next to you.
Last week I was here and went through the Student Opportunity Act with you and what's expected. Prior to that, you received some information about the Student Opportunity Act and what is expected of us. Tonight, what we are going to do is go through what we have been able to do with the narrative of the Student Opportunity Act. As we all know, with the budget of 2025 and beyond still in progress in terms of its development, the reality of you being able to vote on what financially this means for us for the next 3 years. You may not be able to do that tonight, but you do need to know what the narrative says and what it is that we're going to focus the work of the school system on over the next 3 years. And so we will go through that with you tonight. We ask that you really focus on, in your decision-making, what it is that we need to do for students in terms of what is in the narrative. How we get there, as you all know, is a work in progress with our finances. And so ultimately, at some point, we will have to submit this to the Department of Education with a budget and with the addendum that I showed you last week. But as for tonight, we need to make sure that you understand the narrative portion of the SOA. So again, our objectives to review what it is, to examine the submission requirements, to discuss the evidence-based programs that we will submit for this SOA, to provide an update on the submission deadline. Again, as some of you are probably more aware than others, that we are working through with the Department of Education on the budget and how we are going to be able to submit the final SOA. The original deadline for us is April 1st, which is next Monday, which is why this was back on your agenda for tonight, and then your decision-making for our evidence-based programs moving forward. So what's included? Obviously, the state funding that we discussed last week. It addresses a subset of the district's overall objectives. Remember, our strategic plan has a number of things in it, lines that we have outlined and said this is what we're going to do to move our students toward proficiency over the next 5 years, and when we developed it. And so what ends up getting pulled from the SOA are things that really tie directly to our strategic plan. We demonstrated that for you last week. It requires that we set goals to improve, and not just improve, but rapidly improve disparities in achievement among our students who are identified with the lowest performances. It is a 3-year plan, so ultimately we're looking at year 1. What are we doing? How are we building on it on the 2nd year? And then finally the 3rd year. And again, that addendum that we are required to do that is completely financial, looking at how we are using our Chapter 70 funds. And so the summary is, the first part is the summary that we had to look at data and identify the student groups that we were going to target for this particular SOA, set our ambitious goals, which the Department of Education sets for us based on our selected student groups, in family and caregiver engagement information, and then the selection of our evidence-based programs and strategies to address the disparities in achievement. And again, I go back to our 6th part is that submission. And so within the SOA, the summary, the executive summary really identifies that after the data analysis, identifying the student selected groups, which are our students with disabilities, our English learners, and those who are identified as coming from low income backgrounds, and how are we going to support them. Really building on our comprehensive tiered support. We have done a significant amount of work building up a multi-tiered system of support this year, and moving into next year, how we are going to put in place over the next 3 years the staffing that we need to do it effectively, and not just for the social, emotional, and behavioral needs of students, but also for the academic needs of students. At the high school level, in our memorandum of understanding with the Department of Education, and highlighted over and over, and coming up in our accreditation process, is the need for high quality instructional materials for our students in grades 9 through 12, especially in English language arts and science. And so that will be the focus, that adoption process of that curriculum, and the building of supports for teachers who will then be delivering that. It's great to get things in, but you really have to work with staff in order to feel confident and be able to not only just deliver something from a script, but to really drill down and make sure students are getting what they need from it. And so that will be work in grades 9 to 12 over the next 3 years. And as you know, we adopted Wonders, and we have completed year 1 of Wonders, or at least we've done it. We've had 1 year of Wonders. We haven't completed the full curriculum as a single year as of yet. And that curriculum is in the elementary level, and we really targeted our district priority to be our pre-K to 3, and how we are implementing that curriculum and really building literacy skills of our students in pre-K to 3. That work has to continue. We're a long way from done. We're never done. As I always say, you get new kids in, the work starts over. And so this is ongoing work forever, but we are building our skills and strategies on doing it better, and doing it better for the children of this community. So those are our 3 key areas for our Student Opportunity Act. As we shared with you for the part 2, we had to look at data. How did we pick our student selected groups? We used our data. We used the data of the state, and we drilled down to see where can we really do things that will have the biggest impact on the students who are identified as in the lowest performing categories. And again, our data clearly identified our students with disabilities, our English learners, and our students who are from low income backgrounds is needing that additional support, that focus of our work. And as we're building out our programs, that we are really looking at the data on how they're doing to ensure that it's good for everyone, but we have to make sure that what we're doing for them really accelerates their learning and their progress. And again, part 3 is that those ambitious goals set by the Department of Education. Part 4 was the stakeholders and getting a variety of information from different stakeholders through different means, surveys. Some of the surveys that we've done with students, the vocal survey, the survey that was put online for anyone to answer, meetings that happen in the community. As I said last week, even the hearing of visitors informs our thinking about what do we need to do for kids and what do we need to focus our work on for the next 3 years. And then part 5 is the more narrative part, the more detailed part. And because we have 3 assistant superintendents who each lift and help to support and really guide the work that we are talking about under each of these areas, I'm going to have each of them come up and talk a bit about the sections that they help to develop and will continue to do the work throughout the next 3 years. And so the first one is the comprehensive tiered system of support. And so Dr. Lebewal will come up and he will go over that. And this is brief. You got in your packet a draft of the SOA. We were doing some editing because as you saw, it was 11 pages long. We have to narrow it down because as we process what it is that we're doing, we actually have to be more concise in what we submit. And so you'll get another draft. And when we're able to put the financial pieces to it, you'll get the final draft of that. So I'm going to hand it over. And when you're done, you're just going to introduce Michelle and then Karen. Or excuse me, Dr. Connors and Dr. Spalding. And then I'll be back.
Good evening, everyone. So our multi-tiered systems of support actually has 2 sides. So as you know, last year we put a lot of work and effort into initiating and rolling out our multi-tiered model for social emotional learning. On that side of the model, we are proposing the addition of a total of 15 school psychologists over the next 3 years. To give context to the ask, the National Association of School Psychologists recommends a ratio of 1 to 500. Based on Brockton's enrollment, we should roughly employ 32 full-time psychologists. We employ 9. So make that clear. 32 based on enrollment, and we have 9 on faculty right now. 9, correct. One of them is completely dedicated to the pre-K level, and the other 8 between all of them service the other 23 schools and programs in the district. So what we are saying is with that additional state funding, we should be investing over time in the addition of 5 per year. We also have started a new partnership with UMass Boston to be a training site for incoming practitioners into the field. We also are planning to expand our tier 2 and 3 specific interventions based on student need. So as you know, we rolled out Character Strong, which is our new tier 1 social emotional learning program across all of our schools in the district. As we look to the future, we're looking for more specialized tier 2 and 3 interventions, such as second step violence prevention, bullying prevention units, OLIS bullying prevention program, and then specific programs on substance use and abuse. We are seeing issues relative to substance use and abuse in younger and younger students. We do have a nice partnership with Independence Academy through North River Collaborative. They're located over on the fairgrounds, but they generally serve our high school age population. And further looking at specific cognitive restructuring interventions and other pen prevention and selection models to really support students in restructuring some thought patterns that can lead to some troubling behaviors. And then the window has now opened. So hopefully later in the spring, I will be back to present to you the result of our first universal survey of social and emotional learning and mental health that is being administered to all of our students in grades 3 through 12. And there is a sort of a 4-week window that has opened, and our schools are implementing those screenings. Parents have the option to opt out of the screening should they choose. They just had to let us know. But we'll be back hopefully later in the spring to share with the committee the results of our first ever universal mental health survey of all of our students. On the academic side, We are proposing the addition of 41 full-time special educators across the district. Our special education data is suggesting that we are not advancing our students' academic skill. We have a number of caseloads that become relatively unmanageable. As you know, this year we are dealing with an understaffing rather, in special education. Now having to deal with a series of compensatory plans and models for the district to then make up the missed service. As we look to the future, what we are really trying to do is transform the paradigm where we put our most at-risk children with our least experienced educators. It has not shown to be as effective as it needs to be. What we are proposing is, with the additional staff, we partner with our association and we talk about revisions to job description that has them actually working in small groups with children to providing intervention. They are licensed master's level educators who have knowledge in curriculum design, instructional strategies, and various methodologies to actually advance the progress of our students. We cannot stand here another year and talk about the lack of progress and then not make drastic changes in the way we're staffing and supporting our children. The goal here is to also provide them more specific training and supports relative to methodologies and various strategies to teach our students who have learning differences, and make sure that we're affording all of our kids with disabilities the opportunity to access the curriculum. And so the idea is, by fully staffing that department, we address the caseloads. We also provide a higher quality of instructional support to our educators, to our students, through master's level educators. And that's the proposals, again, for the additional funding over the next 3 years, a part of the SOA application Brockton is submitting. And at this point, I will turn it over to Dr. Connors.
Good evening. So as Deputy Superintendent Wolder mentioned at the start, the focus for the 9 through 12 curriculum and instruction portion, or section 5 of the SOA, really focuses on ELA and science. We can go all the way back to the 2020 district review, which called out a lack of curriculum review and revision and implementation across our high school, specific to Brockton High. And then our strategic plan was built off of that, as you know, and now we have our memorandum of understanding, which specifically calls out really 3 things: implementation of high quality instructional materials for science and English, as well as continued implementation of our math. So that doesn't go away. We're just farther along in that process. So it is in the MOU. It just isn't something we need to call out in terms of the SOA funding. There's a whole process, implementation science. So this really is a true 3-year plan. When you start to investigate what are the high quality instructional materials out there. DESE has a curate process. We also reference Ed Reports, which rates our curriculum materials. We start to select from that. Both the science department and the English department will have district-wide curriculum committees. English, already has that committee. They've already started to work on developing curriculum units. So while there would be a high-quality instructional material that's identified, or instructional resource that's identified for ELA, for example, there still has to be curriculum that goes along with it. Brockton High is up for accreditation in the coming 2 years, and they will be looking not only for a resource, because you don't just here's the resource and you teach it. There's units that are developed alongside that, and the resource helps to deliver quality, grade level appropriate, standards aligned curriculum with effective instruction. So both simultaneously, those departments will be working through that process using teams of teachers and leaders across our 9 through 12 high schools to explore, investigate, pilot, and implement. As Deputy Superintendent Wolder mentioned at the beginning, in order to effectively implement and increase student achievement, specifically across the 3 identified student groups, but obviously for all students, you have to support teachers in the implementation. Simply giving teachers a resource doesn't change anything. They need dedicated support. First at the tier 1, where you're implementing for all students, but then as Dr. Labilois mentioned, tier 2 and tier 3, academic intervention is important. That comes later. That's really after year 3. It's fully into years 4 through 6 when you're looking at implementation. And so that it just outlines the process for you. Identify, pilot, implement. There will be, you'll see when we get the budget piece done, adopting curriculum materials is not inexpensive. In working to formulate and cost this out, we looked at our ELA adoption and implementation for 6 through 8. So you're looking at the same number of students roughly across our middle schools as we have in our high schools. And so it's an accurate price. We are working with the Department of Education to identify additional funding sources. For example, growing literacy equity across Massachusetts, our GLEAM grant and our TNTP partners have been instrumental in a successful implementation of Study Sync at the middle school level. So we're seeking that additional support as well. So we are searching for additional opportunities. You know that Dr. Warby, Ms. McGann, and Ms. Guerin all submitted a grant proposal for MLSC. So we're constantly looking for ways to supplement that, but we do recognize that this process will entail the additional staffing, curriculum implementation or curriculum adoption, as well as professional development support. I will turn it over to Dr. Spalding.
I bet we didn't even have to go to the next slide for you to, because I hope by now you'd be able to guess what Karen Spalding will talk about when she comes to the podium and gets the mic for a moment. And that would be literacy, and more specifically, early literacy. Back in the fall of 2022, I presented to the then committee. Some of you were here, and you voted unanimously for us to be able to purchase the Wonders curriculum for grades K through 5, as well as World of Wonders for pre-K. And you voted unanimously in September of 2022. We purchased materials, teachers engaged in professional development, and really lifted that curriculum and really, I would say, embraced and grabbed hold of the opportunity to give all the children of the Brockton Public Schools the most precious gift, and that is the ability to read. And so just want to again give a shout out to the teachers and leaders who have been doing that work. We have gone through, as Sharon Wolder mentioned, we have gone through a year's worth of implementation. We started mid-year last year, so sort of did a full cycle mid-year this year. In addition to that, we also adopted DIBELS 8, which is our literacy screener, and it is a really quick, it takes about a minute or two per student, but it gives us really valuable screening information that tells us where those early reading skills might be and gives us direction to either follow up with some more information gathering or create groups for students for intervention purposes and things like that. So we're building up the curriculum, certainly, but also assessment systems. So the work ahead for us is to really continue to expand pre-K in terms of supporting that work and curriculum. We also, as you know, have a CPPI grant and a CFCE grant, which connects us to the community preschool experiences as well. So really partnering with community preschools as well to really build up literacy skills so that our students, all students that come to us, are ready for kindergarten. We'll be focusing on ensuring Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports, and Tier 2 supports are those sort of shorter term interventions that target very specific skills, whereas Tier 3 might be more intensive and over a longer period of time, but it's really giving students what they need. Developing a framework that really connects the data system that we have implemented in terms of screening and diagnostic assessments, really connects it with the materials that we have. So again, students get what they need. This year we piloted a what I call the school visit tool, school visit notes catcher, which principals and I walk the building. We go through classrooms. We focused on the uninterrupted literacy block to really see what else we could do in terms of supports. And so the work ahead is to add in more specific look-fors around how are we supporting our multilingual learners, how are we supporting our students with disabilities, and then really refining our supports and the systems we have for those two groups in particular, and really continuing to build our partnership with families, because the way we will help students find success is certainly by partnering and engaging with families and doing this work together. So we are really, really proud of the work that has already happened. We are well on our way, and really excited about the work ahead. The implications, which I know we will get to more specifically in the days to come, but the implications at the elementary level, which we have talked about before, is we really have to get class sizes down at the elementary level, especially in the name of supporting early literacy. So that's an important piece of the work, as well as increased staffing for ESL teachers, to really have enough ESL teachers to give the kind of language development support that our students really need. So thank you, and I will hand it back over to Deputy Sharon Wolder.
So this is the part we don't have the answers for, and that is this section of the SOA that requires that we complete an addendum. And that addendum is multiple pages and looks like this. And as you can see, we are expected to fill out every box with the financial information over the next 3 years. And we are in the process of working with the Department of Education to determine how we are going to be able to do that, understanding the financial state of the Brockton Public Schools. So at this point, we promised we'd be back. We didn't know where we would be with the financial piece of it. When I saw you last week, we knew we were going into meetings, and there have been a number of meetings, and I know Trish and others will be up to talk about the budget piece for the Brockton Public Schools in a little bit. But for tonight, we did have to come back and at least share with you the narrative of the work that we have ahead. And as you have heard me say, every time I stand up here, especially after COVID, it costs more to educate kids in the city of Brockton. And the populations of students that we are educating need the supports in order for us to give them the same quality of education and the same opportunities that every other child that they're going to have to compete with as adults have. And so when you hear us say it's going to take more of these teachers or more of this particular support person in order for us to move our students from that 3% and 5% meeting and exceeding to closer to that 90% that we have promised our community. That's where the work gets tough, because that's where hard decisions have to be made about how we are going to fund our school system to make sure our children are getting what they need. So for tonight, we've provided you with the narrative. In the coming days, I believe we have a meeting either this week, or I was told it might be moved to next week, regarding the budget. So the addendum piece will be to come. I will put it that way. That meeting I had scheduled, put on there for you to let you know we had something for the 28th. I've been told since I walked in the door that it might be next week instead, and that's with the Department of Education. So at this point, we'll open it up for questions. And as you know, we have that April 1st submission deadline, and I believe we will probably have an extension on that as well.
Thank you very much. Members of the committee, I'll start with Mrs. Sullivan, please.
I just was wondering, Dr. Lablo, if we could, on the universal mental health survey that's going out, I know some parents had concerns. Is that the one that's in the 5th grade, for the 5th graders right now? I guess the kids fill out something with a bunch of questions, and then I know parents had concerns like what the kids are being asked, what kind of questions the kids are being asked, and what kind of purpose is it going to serve?
So it's the SSIS, SEL Mental Health. Any families who would like to preview are welcome to come in. We can provide copies in all of the school offices. It takes about 5 minutes to complete. I believe it's 19 questions. And what it's designed to do is to let us know what students may be struggling that may not be sort of on our radar or sort of already actively being supported at the school level. That is key data in order for me to come back to you and talk about support systems and structures and whether we're right-sized. Right now, we have a good handle on the number of students who are experiencing behavioral challenges requiring discipline. That generally are kids experience difficulty across two different domains. One being kind of externalizing, right, where the issue is with others. You see that through fighting or violence or aggression. The other are internalizing kids, where the struggles may be anxiety-based depression as a result of issues relative to bullying. Those students are less likely to be observed because our eyes generally go to those students who are exhibiting those more externalizing behaviors. And so the teachers have also sort of expressed that they know that more kids are struggling, but how do we better identify that and provide them individual support? So what will happen is, following the screening, any student who might be at risk will receive contact directly from the school support staff to the family and talk a little bit about the 6 to 8 week intervention that is about to launch to address those areas of skill weakness. We interpret it the very same way we look at, say, reading skills, right? That kids need to be able to read well in school. The screening is the very same thing, but for another set of skills that kids need with social emotional learning and mental health. So again, parents also have the ability to completely opt out. So there's no pressure or no one's being forced to take the survey. All they need to do is let their school know, and we will disable that feature in their online account. So again, I think of it very similar to the way we screen for math skills or for reading skills. We're just screening for another set of skills that better informs how do we better help these students. So we're doing more preventative work than waiting until we're at a point of disciplinary hearings and behavior that's escalated to a point where really we believe deeply that we're here to teach children and not just respond to their behavior. So that is us attempting to really get a handle on what are the needs out there so we can come back to the committee. And also, this will serve as our baseline. So as we move forward, we should see differences in those screenings based on our interventions.
Thank you.
No problem.
Also, you mentioned the Independence Academy.
Correct.
Now, that's still operational
It is.
in the Brockton Public Schools?
We have a partnership with them. So they have a day program to support it. Historically, in order to be serviced by Independence Academy, you needed to be in active recovery. They have since adjusted their protocol, where now they're willing to work with us on students who might be caught vaping or using marijuana. They run an alternative to suspension program to deal with the addiction and to give the right counseling support to the kids. So rather than they'll still be removed from school for that disciplinary period, but rather than sitting at home, they're going to this 10-day program at Independence Academy, where they're able to get the support they need to deal with their addiction.
And that's on the fairgrounds, that building?
It's actually directly across from where the re-engagement center is.
Okay.
It's actually in the same, you can see it from the front door.
And so the group that runs that Independence Academy is?
The Independence Academy is a program of the North River Collaborative in Rockland.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course, anytime.
Ms. Oliver, please.
Oh, I had some more questions.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Sullivan has the floor still.
Okay, so I want to thank you all. This is an awesome job. It's a great job. It's a lot of work, and I can definitely see that you put a lot of work into this. I want to thank Dr. Cobbs and his team, because it's really great work that you're doing, identifying the areas that we need help in, and that's what we need you for. So I was just wondering, I know you kind of answered it, but so the district review in 2020, the areas that we came out low in on that, this is supposed to address that, right? The SOA money that we're getting, the extra money that we're getting to address, or we're supposed to address those areas anyway, right?
So usually every 6 years, there's a district review.
Right.
And in our last review, we scored very low in a number of areas. And so over time, we have been addressing those areas and doing significant work in a number of areas, the early literacy being one of them, the curriculum work that we have not done at the high school in the same way that we've done it across the district is one of those areas it's like we have left to do, right? And so when the district review comes out, it is expecting us to use the funds that we have to run this school system appropriately to address those areas. And those areas come up as areas of need that if you do it well, then your students should have better outcomes. And so this is one of those areas that we have done a number of steering committees and some other work in. But in terms of a real adoption of curriculum in ELA, it was also in, believe it or not, years ago in our last accreditation that we needed to really do some work with curriculum across the board. And at the high school, in a number of departments they have in ELA. And as the frameworks change, you have to update the curriculum that you have. And so there are some areas that we just haven't gotten to yet. And it is time because it has come up in our MOU as part of, we're going to come back and talk to you about Mass Core as a graduation requirement. It's also in the MOU. And so all of these things build on each other to make sure that we are doing the best that we can for the students in this district.
Thank you. Also, the thing is, if we could, because I know the school committee was marked down on this, on the district review, that we weren't asking for enough data, like from your group. So if we could see like data as things go on, because that's one of the things that Desi will ask the school committee when they come in. And I know that we were marked down on that in 2020.
Yes.
So school committee members should be asking to see data and progress on achievement goals for students and the goals that the administrative team has identified here. And we should be all very interested in seeing advances in that, because the number one job of a school committee is student achievement.
Absolutely. And up until this year, we had been giving you far more data. This year has been a little different if we all want to be honest about it. And we actually had principals coming for a while to share with you their school-based data. And because you've had so many things going on, we've had a couple of meetings now where they have not been sharing that. But you are correct. The need for you to see data so that when we come to you and say, this is what we have to be able to do for children, and here's why, you need to feel confident in what we're sharing with you, and at least in advance have knowledge about how our students are doing. So when you're making those decisions about what we need to do for this system, you feel confident that you're making the right ones.
Thank you.
Ms. Oliver, please.
Question. For their mental health survey, was there something sent out prior to it going out, letting parents know there was one being sent out?
There was, yes.
Because I know I got a lot of feedback from parents wanting to basically answering some of the questions. I know a lot of them can opt out, but I think it's a great idea for them to answer so we can help their kids, especially if they're having anxiety, or if they're going through trauma, so we can try to help them. And how many language was those surveys basically put into?
So the staff in the building, if we have students who speak languages other than English, are supporting the students through translation of the survey. So the survey is translated into 3 major languages, but not all of the languages spoken in Brockton. So for the less populated languages, I guess, but they're less frequently used, we're supporting through our classroom educators to support with translation. So they're doing it more as a class, just as they would do it for the vocal survey at the end of MCAS, where the teacher would read the question out loud. So there was no concern around reading comprehension or whether everyone's going at their own pace. And, some kids will go through it in 30 seconds and fill out all the answers and be done. Other kids will read each word by word. And so the educators in the classroom are helping them, supporting them in the completion of the survey.
Thank you.
But I appreciate that feedback. So if there's any other feedback on how we can improve our communication to the community on the survey, this is our pilot, right? We've never done this before. So any feedback, positive or negative, is welcome.
That's great. Also, it's a shocker that we only have 9 psychologists out there. And
Yeah.
do you know what's the reason why we don't not have 32? Is it fun? Is it just not, like, why are we not what we're supposed to have 32 within the school district?
I'll try to give you sort of what I have surmised over my sort of roughly year and a half here. One of them has to do with the disconnect between how they function in the district and how they are trained to function. Right. So, and we have a psychologist here with us this evening. Hello, Jamie. She knew I was speaking tonight, and as a psychologist, wanted to come and hear the conversation. So, the National Association of School Psychologists advocates for a full service model in a school where they're not just used as a diagnostician, so they don't just run around and give everybody a WISC or an intelligence assessment. There's clinical training and skill relative to counseling, consultation, program development, screening, data analysis, classroom instructional strategy. They're underutilized. And so, for example, we had a psychologist who joined us for 1 year. So we actually had 10 as we ended last year, who resigned due to frustrations relative to the role. Many of our psychologists at this point have completed well over 100 evaluations. They can't keep up with the volume, and the role that they play is key. And so that's one side of the issue, right? Is that the focus is on them as diagnosticians rather than the full service model they're actually trained in. And the other is the investment in the district. So I don't want to at any point suggest that we weren't committed to students' mental health and wellness, because we were. The addition of counseling staff, right, over the years, adjustment counselors, for example, sort of reflects the district's long-term commitment to the mental health and wellness. That group of people were not necessarily included because they were perceived often as belonging to the special education department and served as an extension of special education. We're seeing them more a whole part of our social emotional learning office, so that we're actually reorganize them to be a part of our SEL office and actually not necessarily tie them to special education, where the focus there, rightly so, was on teachers and specialized programming and being responsive to kids' needs, not necessarily on all the full related service that they can provide. That's sort of my summation over the last year and a half here. But the feedback has been for those schools who get to work with them on a more regular basis. Our largest schools do have a psychologist assigned as much as we can give them, utilize them well beyond just testing. And so the goal is to really provide that as another tool in our toolbox, right, of social emotional learning and mental health support in schools by offering a full service team available to every school.
Thank you.
Mr. Gomes, please.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you to you guys for all the work you've been doing. I also had the same question about the translation piece. So I just wanted to clarify. So right now we have them in multiple languages and not just providing the service if they need it.
Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
So for instance, let's say I come in, I need one of those surveys. We have them available in different languages.
That is not every available language. So the survey is administered by a teacher in a classroom. So the students just don't log in and take a survey. Every school is planning with their faculty when they will administer. Right. So parents were informed, I believe a week and a half or 2 weeks ago, they were given a window to let us know if they chose to not participate. From there, each school and classroom teacher finds dedicated 15 minutes during the day to administer the survey. So the teacher will know their classroom and if they are in a bilingual classroom, the teacher in the language spoken by the students will read the survey along with the children. But we don't have I want to be just totally transparent. We do not have that survey translated into every single spoken language spoken in the Brockton community. So our pilot, our learning here, right, is how do we collect this data? Because just because you do not speak English doesn't mean we don't assess your mental health and wellness, right? So I can appreciate that we need it in the actual language. And until we're able to partner with the company, the material is copyrighted. We thought we could just have it translated ourselves. And with the copyrighted material, it's taking a little bit longer. It's not that simple. So what the company said was the best bet is just to offer oral translation and do it together as a class.
Yeah, so
makes sense. So that way we weren't violating any copyright laws or getting ourselves in trouble unwittingly by trying to have it available to as many as possible.
And just to go off of that, did we design the survey or is it something that we purchased?
It's something we purchase
Okay.
because along with that purchase comes a suite of intervention programs and models for tier 2 and 3. So once we give the survey and we see certain scores that might need an intervention, the program actually comes with a whole suite of evidence-based interventions that they can run in small groups for kids with those skill gaps.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then my other question was also in regards to the 32, FTEs, psychologists, and here and there we only have 9. I work in the mental health area. It is overwhelming. Even if you have a regular number of clients, imagine having 9 for the whole. So what are we doing while we only have these 9 individuals?
We're supporting them as best we can.
When you say supporting,
The clinicians actually out doing the work.
okay,
I can't just create positions in people, right? So that's why I'm in front of the committee articulating the need and sort of hoping for the future that we can address this problem more systematically. I also think I'm not convinced we'll find 15, but this is a national shortage and it's not just us. Every other district around us is experiencing a shortage. They don't have enough. They're trying to find more. Everyone else is experiencing sort of this explosion, right, in relative to mental health needs. We're incredibly lucky and proud of the 9 that we have, right, who are absolutely killing themselves trying to keep up with the demand. And the reality becomes we absorb in their frustration, we allow them to vent, we sort of commiserate and acknowledge their lived experience as being less than ideal. And all I can offer them is a vision for the future that makes it better. Right? I can't just go out and hire more people and create the money and make it happen, which is why we're here saying the long-term vision of the district, not only for the quality of the working experience for our clinicians and our psychologists, but also the quality of the educational experience for our kids, demand that we pay attention in this space.
okay. And I also had just one more question. This goes, it's about the budget.
Well, I'm not doing it earlier.
I know, I was just gonna ask. I know we don't have a
And
budget.
before
yet.
you get to the budget, on the school psychologists, one of the glaring needs are psychologists who are multilingual.
Yes.
Okay.
I should have said that.
Now to the hard part. Go ahead.
Let's see. I know you guys plan on meeting with Desi, to get more information on
Yes.
how to work the budget. So what would you need in order for you guys to come up with a number and do the breakdowns and whatnot?
So we can give you numbers. As you hear numbers and salaries are attached to those numbers, in terms of what we have, not losing it, because it doesn't make sense to say, give me 15 of these if the answer is then take away 15 of those. Because that ends up being you're losing classroom teachers or you're getting psychologists, but you're losing school adjustment counselors. We can't operate that way. And so what we will do is say, here's what high quality instructional materials in ELA will cost us in order to implement this the way we are supposed to at the secondary level, and same with science. And with the psychologists and the educators for students with disabilities and the teachers of English ESL, we can say this is what we need over the next few years, but that is in addition to what we currently have if we intend to make the progress that we are committing to and promising our community. And so we can come up with those things. The tough thing for us is our reality is we have to live within the budget that we have. And so what we did not want to do is come before you or submit to the Department of Education, just the exercise in paper to say, here it is, and we plugged in all the numbers the way we were told to do, give us the A. The reality is we have to create something that we all live with, that we all commit to, and that we all can say, this is how we are going to educate the children of Brockton for the next 3 years. And so without knowing what our budget for next year will be, and obviously we wouldn't know for the year after that and the year after that necessarily, but the SOA does indicate that there's increases in funding for our community. Without knowing our baseline, it is difficult to tell you what next year will look like.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Vice Chair, please.
Thank you. Dr. LeBois. I know we had this conversation roughly close to a year now about setting up, and it's gonna, also affect a restructure with certain, I believe it was adjustment counselors with certain licenses. Is that the same, or is this totally different from to support the mental health?
It's different. So there were additional psychologists, a part of that bigger picture reorganization of the school-based teams. But what I think the outcome, if I recall, was a study group, and I think I'm looking at Kim not to put her on the spot, but because I think we were working in partnership with BEA relative to a labor management group to sort of study the issue and then sort of bring a recommendation back. The initial proposal, I think, while well-intentioned, was a lesson in communication and ensuring that everybody had the same information. There was a lot of rumor and innuendo going around and gossip around what was happening and what wasn't happening. And the next thing you know, we're not moving forward with it. And I think it was the proposal actually had an increase relative to the counseling staff. All told, we actually have the people to make the model work. If you recall, we were talking about sort of a school-based team with full-time people servicing each school. Right now, we have that for maybe say sort of 2 adjustment counselors, and then sort of that's really it. Right. So the idea was there was an adjustment counselor, there was a social worker, a mental health counselor, a school psychologist, as well as the secondary level guidance counselors. And that team together then supported the mental health and wellness of a school. And so in order to make that work, we needed to look at, do we have enough people on staff already? It was about reorganizing them to be more effective based on their own clinical training and background, and not necessarily just change for the sake of change. The feedback that we received from the faculty, from the teachers, from the support staff, and from some of our small student groups was they needed more resources to actually help the students in front of them. So this is a complement. And if we can sort of get that level of staffing for next year, we can begin to sort of think differently about how those school-based teams are formed. But that formal proposal that was a part of last year's office restructuring and sort of re-envisioning was placed on hold. And so what we need to do is sort of talk more openly with the association and their members around any concerns and sort of put those on the table to process through more comprehensively.
And that attached a grant, right? There was a grant for that, if I'm not mistaken. Wasn't there a grant attached to that with one of the partners?
So you're right. So UMass Boston, together with Brockton Public Schools, Quincy Public Schools, and I believe Lawrence Public Schools, those 3 districts together, University of Massachusetts at Boston, as a part of their commitment to increasing linguistically and culturally diverse mental health personnel in schools, won a national NIH grant to the tune of $20 million over 3 years to actually open programs. So that partnership is the grant I was referencing. And so in order for us to begin to recruit and become a training ground for those school psychologists, we have to begin to adjust our model to sort of be what the 21st century psychologist does in a school, and not look at them as just psychometricians.
And then another component here is looking at the chronic absenteeism in the district. So how is this SOA gonna formulate into supporting that, making sure that with our dropout rate and the chronic absenteeism within the district, how are we gonna attack that problem?
So if we think about the proposal in the multi-tiered model in social emotional anyway, absenteeism is one of the data points, right, that school-based team would be looking at and programming around. And for students who have more chronic offenses, that's where we might have a higher level of intervention. I think right now, and I don't want to speak for the entire faculty of the support staff in the district, because I'm sure others would disagree and have different experience. What we have generally observed is the ability to address that with the current staffing level is incredibly challenging when they're dealing with issues every day during the school day, and that thoughtful planning and intervention requires more support. And so if we think about that school-based team model and the increase of psychological staffing to every school, if we think about a multi-tiered model actually catching academic skill before we develop an impairment and a disability, and we can actually remedy some of those skills earlier in kids' careers, not only for academics, but also in the social emotional realm. We're thinking in the long run, sort of providing a better future for everybody rather than just remediating what's gone wrong. So in order to do that, though, effectively, we need additional support and staff to build a comprehensive model. When students are not engaging in school, it's likely due to a disconnection to relationship, a fear of failure, or they're lacking the necessary skills to actually feel effective. And so when I also oversee, as you know, the re-engagement team, whose job it is to actually go out and find students who have dropped out and re-engage them back in school. And 9 times out of 10, the issue becomes, I just didn't feel like I belonged. I just didn't feel like I belonged. I don't feel like anybody saw me, anybody supported me, or anyone was looking out for me. All I can say is, we hear you. And so what could we do differently? And that's where we got feedback on things like screenings and more intervention programs. If somebody had reached out to me sooner when it began, it might have changed and made a difference. Connection to families is important so that they all know that we're a united front. So we haven't lost the dream of a comprehensive school-based team supporting sort of the multifaceted nature of child development. But the reality that we're now facing is, in order to sort of take the next step, we need the support, the materials to run the interventions. We need the staffing to do it effectively, and we need the community support, right, to know that we are really trying to do the right thing and want to support kids as best we can. So in my brain, that MTSS model supports every single child in Brockton, regardless of language spoken or background or presence in school. The goal is that if you're not in school, we're looking at that data sooner and putting in place more interventions as a part of that team model that's looking at absenteeism data as a part of their ISTs. And some have started, right? So we see pockets of growth and a wonderful progress being made, but it's not at the scale, right, that we're hoping to see.
Just one more question. I don't know if there'll be a follow-up to this, but looking at our student population growing, I don't know if you can answer this. How does this affect, because we're averaging close to 100 students per month, if I'm not mistaken, that's grown, and it's 13, roughly over 13 from last year to this year. Since July 1st, that increase. So how, when we submit this SOA, is that being dictated to DESI? I mean, obviously they know the numbers. How is that gonna affect this? Because we don't know come next month, it can go to 200 because of the influx of migrants that are coming in into the community.
I will pivot to Sharon, but the appropriation, my understanding is the SOA money for next year was based on enrollment. So as the enrollment grows, the additional funding through the SOA program through that same model will also grow. We're trying to advocate on a separate level through MASS at the state level for them to take an average of the 3 enrollment reports and use that as the foundation for SOA the next year. Right now, they're just taking October 1st. And if we look at the volume of increase just by October 1st, next year's funding is already out of the gate and not where it needs to be for actual enrollment. So one of the legislative priorities of the State Association of School Superintendents is to advocate for when they identify the enrollment to base the foundation budget on, they're using an average of the 3 enrollment points and not October 1. We said you can take October 1, but take October 1, an average of October to January and is it March, and use those and then take that average and have that be the next number versus just the October 1 report.
Okay. And the other piece is knowing that we have to have this certain model to address mental health. And I know there's, we only have 9 and we want to grow to 32. Obviously there's a financial component. Is it possible for you to actually give us the actual, this is what you actually need with a 32, this is the cost, and this is the cost of actually having that team district-wide? Because we have to look at the long,
Sure.
We're looking at getting the 15 within 3 years, but to get to the 32, how long is it going to actually take to get to the 32 and what the actual financial piece is looking now, just on that piece.
So I don't think we're far off, right? So let me rephrase. So there are 9 current psychologists employed by Brockton, but there are 12 in the budget. So there are 3 open positions right now. So in our brain, we're actually at the starting point. While we're only employing 9, we're hoping for next year, right, to add the 5 positions to actually be able to have 17. Then the next year, that'll get us to 22, right? 22, and then to 27. So by the end of the 3-year, we're not far off of that sort of recommended ratio of 1 to 500. We're a heck of a lot closer than we are now. To that point, I can certainly go back and say, what would it cost? I do have the cost breakout over the next 3 years of the additional 5. We used a master's 5 as just a placeholder for budgeting. That just seemed reasonable relative to people coming in. They're going to have at least master's degree, if not advanced degree, or CAGS or certificate in graduate study, if not doctorates. But for budgeting purposes, for sort of calculation, we did a master's 5. So we do know that number. For 15 additional, I can up that to get us to the 32, and through Sharon or Dr. Cobbs, get that back to the committee.
I think overall with the school side, with the financials that we're dealing with, because we have to show where we're going to be within 5 years. So the district, this is our number this year, whatever it is, next year, this is where it's at. So the city side as well, because this is going to be a team effort to address the finances of the city. But thank you for your,
of course.
Thank you for your hard work, everyone. So, we have a lot of work to do.
Mr. Sullivan, please.
Yes, Deputy Walder, it's a budget question. I know you're good at it.
Go ahead.
The SOA funds, what is that, a percentage of the Chapter 70 money that they give you extra?
What they do, and I showed it to you before, they identify as based on your enrollment, and I'll send it to you. They take a number of things to create the formula that determines how much more money that a school system is going to get. And so it starts with the enrollment. And I shared it with you. I'll send it to you directly, because you can look right through it and it'll explain line by line by line how the Department of Education calculates this Chapter 70 aid for a district. And so where we have a certain population of students, the percentage, how they look at the percentage of students with disabilities, English learners, and how they look to fund those populations of students differently. All of that is laid out and explained in the Chapter 70 aid information. I'll send it to you so you can look at it. It's actually a spreadsheet with multiple lines. I think it was a link in one of the things that I sent to you, but I'll just send you that directly, so you don't have to go through a link. You can just look directly at it.
The other question is the Student Opportunity Act money, does that come at the same time as Chapter 70?
It's Chapter 78. And so I think a lot of times people get confused that it's like you get your Chapter 78, and in addition, there's this extra lump of money. It's calculated into what they give you for Chapter 78. And so when I showed you the slide the last time that said, here's where we were for Chapter 78 in last year, and or for this year, and what's anticipated for next year, and it's about a $15 million difference coming to Brockton. That is all the Chapter 70 aid that we get. And so it is not, you get your aid and then we give you another lump of money. It's all one set of money. They're just looking at, because you get more money than you got last time, how are you dedicating that money to rapidly improving the results of students who are significantly behind.
I just wanted to say to you and your whole team, great job, a nice presentation.
Thank
I
you.
mean, it was well thought out and well presented by all 3. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan, follow up, please.
I just wanted to ask Dr. Jamie, do you think that because the social emotional program is a new program for Brockton Public Schools, and we've adopted these new materials, that we never really asked the parents to sign off on something like this? I don't think. But do you think maybe it would be good to have maybe like a little introduction for parents before the kids have to fill out that. It might reduce a lot of questions that the parents had this time.
Sure.
We could do like a little, they could either watch a video or you could do a public meeting or something to present it. So parents would know what the program is, what the kids are going to be asked. Because I like the way you explained it at the beginning, because you said the reason why we're doing this. And I think parents have to hear that.
Sure.
The reason why we're doing this.
I'm happy to
And
take
the
that
reason
feedback.
why the
Absolutely.
kids are being asked these questions.
Anything we can do to increase the likelihood of family and community members engaging in this, I will do anything. I'll walk down Main Street if I have to.
Right.
With a sign.
Usually
I'll do
if
whatever I
you-
have to do.
Right. If you communicate it to the parents and they know, they feel more comfortable about it. So I'm wondering if we could maybe do that next time instead.
Absolutely. We
Just
have-
sending a text.
Absolutely.
No.
I will share this feedback tomorrow with the SEL team and sort of strategize how we can, even though it's already launched, how we can maybe follow up with additional information should anybody have any feedback. So, or if anybody on the committee is receiving questions, if you wanted to forward them along to us, even at the general theme, we'll make sure that any additional communication addresses those themes you're hearing about in feedback from the community. We're
Thank
happy
you.
to.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. Any other follow-ups? Matter comes before us, it's highlighted in red. What's the will of the committee relative to a vote of the SOA narrative?
SOA narrative that's been introduced to us tonight by the executive team.
Motion on the floor made by Mrs. Sullivan, second by Mr. Gomes. All in favor of that, kindly raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. It passes. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll now go on to Agenda 6, update from TJ Plant, Open Architects. We were informed this morning via text that Mr. Plant is unable to join us tonight relative to a situation, unexpected situation that arose. I would ask that we postpone this matter and put it on the next school committee meeting that we're going to be having. Is there a motion?
Except that
We're just
going to move it to the
postpone
next school
meeting.
committee meeting, the report by Mr. Plant.
Motion on the floor. Is there a second? Motion was made by Mrs. Sullivan. It was properly seconded by Ms. Oliver. Kindly raise your hand if you are in favor of that. Raise your hand if you're opposed. We will postpone that to the next school committee meeting. We'll go on to Agenda 7, which is FY 2025 budget planning. City CFO Troy Clarkson, interim school business administrator Patricia Boyer. I know both Troy and Tricia here tonight. Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Since Trish and I appeared before you last week, we submitted to you via email both the PowerPoint presentation that we provided to the representatives of the Commonwealth at our meeting at the State House last week, and more than 200 pages of supporting information. So we had that meeting and had the dialogue related both to the FY24 budget and the challenges that we face and our current planning for FY25. Trish and I and Dr. Cobbs had a follow-up discussion this afternoon with representatives from DESE and from the Department of Revenue. So those discussions are ongoing. As I hope you saw in the packet that we provided you, Open Architects is working with us very closely on trying to define the number for net school spending for both this year and to project the one for next year. That calculation includes expenses that are reflected in the city's budget, but directly support education. So as we discussed at your meeting last week, that number is fluid and we're working hard on it. One of the commitments that we made was that our team is going to work together with the folks from Open Architects to try to come to some consensus on those numbers that we can then discuss with all of you. So those numbers are fluid, and it's because taking into account the state aid that you just heard about and the city's responsibility to provide a number and take into account those other costs that need to go into that formula, it's something we're working very hard on. That work is ongoing. Trish and I actually have a meeting, my regular meeting tomorrow, and one of the items we're going to discuss at that meeting is an update on the tremendous work that Trish has done to try to address the grants. And we're trying to put the city in a position that when we get to this June 30th, some of those reductions that we saw on the city's free cash will not occur, because we do anticipate having pretty significantly reduced free cash, and we want to make some funds available should those transportation costs require some assistance from the city as we get towards June 30th. So that's a brief update that I have. Trish is here as well. If you have any questions, or if you'd like Trish to provide a brief update, we can do that as well.
Members of the committee? Mr. Sullivan, please.
We just had, the school committee got emailed from the Haverhill School Committee, and I gave it to Ms. Clarkson about a resolution to ask the state to adjust the SOA money, and I talked to Dr. Cobbs about this, to the rate of inflation. And so they're asking the Gateway City School Committees to, and Mr. Clarkson, I gave him the resolution, and I emailed Dr. Cobbs and the mayor, but I don't know if the mayor, if you saw it yet.
Not yet.
But Mr. Clarkson is aware that we need to do that they need it by the middle of April. So they said we can just copy their resolution, and then we need to add in about the inflation piece. And I talked to the man on the Haverhill School Committee, and so I have the wording for that, and I'm going to send it to Mr. Clarkson tomorrow. And I'll send it to you too, Mrs. Boyer.
Thank you, Mr.
So if
Sullivan.
we can maybe sign it by next week, I think we'd get it in time.
Yeah, we'll have legal counsel look at it as well, but yeah, that would be
Okay.
great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I do just want to thank the vice chair and Dr. Cobbs and both Trish and Troy. Also, City Council President Moses Rodriguez joined us last week in Boston, along with Attorney Megan Bridges, solicitor, Attorney Sarah Spatafor from Murphy Hesse. We will continue to work with ANF. We will continue to work with DOR. We will continue to work with DESE. And again, our 3 state reps and state senate delegation will be working with us. We had a meeting again in my office this morning with the vice chair and Dr. Cobbs and Troy, Trish, and Moses Rodriguez in his capacity again. So we're going to continue to brainstorm. But again, I do want to thank you. The information that was provided last week was very detailed, and it took a ton of time, a ton of efforts from both of you, but also your team. I know some of the team at City Hall is working 12, 14 hours, so I just wanted to publicly thank you. Any other questions at this time? Mr. Vice Chair.
I don't know if there's anything that Trish wants to update us on her side of it. I mean,
Sure.
she's working very hard to address a lot of issues. So I don't know if any members or if you have anything to elaborate, not putting you on the spot, but.
Oh, that's okay. Good evening, everybody. So I don't want to be repetitive, but my part has been working with the grants and the grant deficits and trying to straighten that out. And I know that the Department of Ed is very concerned about the grant deficits that have been existing. So I'm working through the accounting mechanisms to clean those up, in addition to all the other pieces that we're trying to put together to stabilize FY24's budget and to come up with a good solid budget for FY25. So a lot of people are working behind the scenes to get this going. Yes.
Give us updates on the grants. How many has been closed and how many are trying to close so far?
Sure. So there were about 24, let's say, grants that needed to be cleaned up. And I've probably gotten through 50% of them.
And what year was those?
Most of them are from 21, 22, a few from 23.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Oliver. Any additional questions for either Trish or Troy at this time? Follow up by Mr. Sullivan.
So I was just looking at, Mr. Clarkson, you presented us with this paperwork here. It says multi-million-dollar challenges in transportation, special ed, and personnel. And I just wanted to point out to the public that's always been a challenge, has always been a challenge on the Brockton Public Schools since I've been on 11 years. Transportation special ed and personnel has always been. So it continues to be a challenge after me 11 years on the committee. So I don't know what we can do, but we have to do something.
And that's not just only in Brockton, that's statewide and
Right.
nationwide.
Yeah. So thank you for all you do.
A follow-up, Ms. Oliver, please.
I have a quick question. I know you said 50% of them are closed. Do you know why it's taken so long for you to close it? Is it because you need more people in that department to help you?
Absolutely, yes. We're down 5 people plus a procurement officer and a grant manager. So we're down 7 people in the office.
So how many people in the department right now, counting yourself,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
that works full-time?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
2 are dedicated to paying invoices. So they don't help in any of these types of functions that we're performing now. So take those 2 out of the equation.
Ms. Oliver, you all set?
Yes, I'm also.
Mr. Gomes, please.
It was just a follow-up question. So how long does it usually take to close a grant?
Well, if a grant is managed properly throughout the process of the grant or the period of the grant, be it 12 months or 24 months or 27 months, it normally, you'd be following it right along. You'd be balancing the grant on a monthly basis. And the process really to close a grant, is just to go into the Department of Ed's accounting system, put in your final budget numbers and submit it, and it's done. If you owe money back to the state, then you have to put a purchase order through, which would signal a check to go back to DESI. So closing a grant, if you follow it all along, is a matter of 20, 30 minutes.
Okay. And so you've seen all the grants that we still have open, right?
Yes.
How long do you think it'll take to close all of them the proper way?
If I worked solely on those, it would probably take a week or 2. And I'll give you an example. So you had heard that we were stating all year that the IDEA grant had not come in yet, which is over $4 million. So in the meantime, we had to charge all of the staff to continue to charge the staff to the FY23 IDEA grant, which put it in a deficit because there was no funding source yet awarded to Brockton for FY24. That grant was just awarded Friday to us. So now we have to go through the process of creating organization codes, accounting codes in the Munis system. We have to move all the staff through payroll into the new accounting codes. And then I'll go through the process of journalizing all of the charges that went to the 23 grant into the 24 grant. So that couldn't happen until the grant was awarded. So something like that, we couldn't even do anything with that one till this past Friday.
Okay.
So there's challenges like that.
And based on what you've seen and with the challenges that we're facing, what's the estimate roughly?
To finish them?
To finish closing them, yeah.
A few more weeks.
A few more weeks.
Yeah. Because that's not the sole thing that I'm working on.
No, I understand. One
Dr.
more.
Cobbs calls me a one-armed paper hanger, wallpaper hanger.
No, we appreciate the work you guys are doing.
Thank you.
I know you need more staff, but for the staff that you have, you guys are doing a tremendous amount of work.
Thank you.
One other question. I always put a note if a question is left, so when I come back, I remember. Did we ever find out the formula for the Schedule 19?
So that's what I was referencing a few minutes ago when I said that that's something that we're working on closely with the folks from DESI. We talked about it this afternoon. We have committed to working. Our plan is to actually go back a couple of years to try to understand the formula that has been developed and to use that as the foundation for what we believe and is in that packet that I sent you. That is the number for this year and then the projection for next year. So we're really trying to piece together a multi-year projection so that we have an accurate number that we can then use in calculating both what the number is for FY25 and then make a recommendation to the mayor about what level of funding should go before the city council.
Yeah, so I believe last time you said we had maybe a consultant, like outside organization, do that formula for us, right? And we've been using it since.
Open Architects is on board as a consultant to the city now. They're working with us every day, and so they're part of that effort, yes.
So are we gonna create a new formula then? Because I know for FY25, we need to finalize the numbers, and that is something that's standing out, and we don't know how we got that number.
So there's a couple of different options there, and those are on the table, and those are things that we're discussing, whether or not, in some communities, for instance, the municipality and the school district have an actual written memorandum that outlines how it's calculated and what numbers go into it. So we're looking at that as an option, and that's probably something we'll recommend moving forward. In the interest of getting a budget put together for the FY25 number, I suspect we'll have a consensus amongst the school administration, the mayor, the school committee, and the combined finance team as to what that number should be for FY25.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gomes. Any other questions, Vice Chair, please?
Trish, is it fair to say like with the grants real quick, is it fair to say that the grant writers should be monitoring the grants to see when it's supposed to be closed out, or is this something that once it's in units, it's strictly finance?
Oh, no, absolutely. We need to have a grant administrator to help monitor the grants and be on top. In addition to the grant managers themselves should be looking at this. But if some of them are new, they don't have experience with it, it's great to have a grant accountant help, or the grant administrator should have the knowledge to help stay right on top of these things. Grants really should be looked at on a monthly basis.
All right, so excuse me. I think that should be added to when we do our moving forward, when we have our finance, a list of all the grants when they close out and the balances that remain in there, so we know that these grants, so we don't fall into this grant problem
Right.
again, and when they should be closed out. So if we can get that would be
Right.
great.
I'm putting that list together for you to have all of that information. Mind you, there's probably close to 80 grants, so it's going to be a lengthy report, but I do agree that you should have that on a monthly basis.
Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Clarkson. Thanks, Ms. Boyer.
Thank you all
Appreciate it.
very much.
Before we go into Agenda 8, which is executive session, Dr. Cobbs?
First of all, I'd just like to say congratulations to our #1 winning drama club for winning the state competition. Well done. Outstanding students. I believe there'll be one more production for the play, which is Charlie's Aunt. I plan on going to that one. I hope everybody else does. Can't wait to see it. The other thing I'd like to give a shout out to to our drone club for preparing for their competition. They've been working hard, and the competition will be coming up pretty soon. I think Sharon, help me out. Did they win last year for the drone competition?
They won 3rd place last year and took the 2 leadership awards.
Excellent. So we will wish them well this year, and that's all I have for.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. Before we, let me read this into the record. Agenda 8 is executive session, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel, all non-union individual contracts. And then the next one, the second and last one, is Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. I so declare. It's BEA, BESPA, IBAA-TEA. We will be going to executive session. Is there a motion to go into executive session, please?
motion to go into executive session.
Motion was made by Mr. Gomes. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Sullivan. So we have a motion properly second. I'll call the roll right now. Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mr. Gomes?
Yes.
Ms. Oliver?
Yes.
Vice Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. We're going to executive session. We will not be coming back into open session. We're going to executive session right now, please.